Before today's episode, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and recognise their continued connection to the beautiful land and sea. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend this acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the land my listeners are on. Welcome to Ritual the Podcast, your cottage in the woods. A sacred space for the witches, the healers, the magical folk to meet and speak of wisdom, witchery, and old world magic, where people come to learn, to hear stories, to share secrets, and to be free to be their true selves. Welcome to Ritual.
So when I started my Hecate journey, when I really started to work with her, one of the things I always do is I'm such a nerd for information, and I like to read everything. I like to watch everything. And then I think it was probably towards the end of last year, I found this amazing book, and it was called Hecate, Goddess of the Witches. And it was one of those ones where when you start, you kind of inhale the entire thing. And that's why today I'm very excited, because I am sitting here with the author of this amazing book. Her name is Courtney Weber. She is a Wiccan priestess. She is a tarot advisor, and she is a writer of so many amazing books. I know everyone who has read a book from her, and the first thing they say is, oh my God, I love her book. She's such an amazing writer. And I'm not trying to suck up to you right now, but I truly mean it. I think that you have a gift of words. So thank you, Courtney. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Amy. And my long weathered ego could use the boost. So I'm great.
I'll keep it coming. I'll just make a note every 5 minutes. Tell Courtney she's amazing.
Okay. And then when my husband comes home, he'll be like, who are you talking to? Oh my God, you're on the ceiling. What are we going to do?
Apparently I'm amazing. So, you know.
I know. That's exactly what I'm going to say.
So where are you in the world right now?
I am in a little town called McMinnville, just outside of Portland, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the United States. We've got 3 states on the west coast.
Yeah.
California, Oregon, and Washington. Oregon's in the middle.
Yeah.
So I'm between 2 giant I almost said Silicon Valley, Microsoft to the north and Silicon Valley to the south. So
I want to go to Portland so much. I've heard it's beautiful. Is it I imagine it to be very sea town. Is that completely imaginary, or is it?
Well, it's a funky, weird little city with a big river that's flowing through the middle of it. It's, it is. I guess I describe it in comparison to our neighbor Seattle to the north.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are familiar with Seattle because of the grunge scene in the 90s and
Sleepless in Seattle.
Sleepless in Seattle. So they're very rainy cities. They're very progressive.
Yes.
They're full of white people, which take from that what you will. But we have, I consider Seattle and Portland to be siblings, and Seattle is a sibling that was super popular and cool in high school and got kind of boring as it got older. Got a really steady job, is making a lot of money, got a big house in the suburbs, and married a really nice but kind of boring.
They ticked the boxes.
They ticked all the boxes. They're super dependable. They're always going to be there for you, but they're not going to bring the party. Now, Portland, on the other hand, is the sibling that can't quite get its shit together. You start to think they're it's like, oh, you're turning a corner, you got it going, and then they just go off the rails again. And you're like, okay, well, that was some effort there. They had a thing going for a while. We thought they were going up. It's progress. At the same time, they're the ones that keeps the whole family on their toes.
Yes.
And keeps pushing them further into thinking bigger. And they're a lot more fun at parties.
That's the best description of a place I've ever heard.
It is. It's like Portland. There was this period of time where, when I was growing up, Portland, no one knew where it was. They were like, what the hell is Portland?
Yeah.
And there wasn't much going on there. And then then a lot of people started moving there in the 2000s, and it became super hip and super cool, and super popular. And then, it was starting to get really big, and I was like, "Oh, we're feeling like Seattle," but it's okay. It took a dive again. It's
We're not that great. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, it took a dive. It got funky. It's having a tough time right now. I'm not gonna lie. I think a lot of American cities are. In Portland, it's because I think it's geographically small. We've noticed it a lot more, and it just got hit really, really hard by some of the housing crises and the pandemic and some drugs, and it's just been Portland's, it's still got that really weird progressive spirit, but it's
which is much better than a lot of places over there at the moment, I must say.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard. Watching from here, it's a chaos. Like I every day I go on a rant about it because I'm like, this is the most insane thing I've ever heard. Like, for such a progressive country, I'm going, what are you doing?
Oh, honey.
So I can only imagine. Oh, honey. I know. It's probably, I know.
Oh, honey. You think we're progressive?
From the outside,
baby girl.
maybe. But now I know that you're not. And I can only imagine what it feels like to be there at the moment. Like, there must be so much like conflict within people and also anger. That's just what I see from it.
Well, it's been, honestly, it has been it's been like this, and it's gotten worse, but it's been like this for 20 years since 9/11. And the way things, 9/11, we had this incredibly divisive, people were scared. And they were in shock, and there was a lot of grief and anger, and grief and anger can manifest in some really cruel ways. And the president at the time really ushered in this kind of this idealistic cowboy mentality, which I'm not going to go on my rant about who cowboys really were, but it was the sense of, you can't question what's going on, because then you're not a patriot. And I was one of those kids that was out there protesting the Iraq War. I was questioning our reasons for going in Afghanistan. And every time I did, it was, you don't love your country, you are a traitor. Because for asking the questions. But then, Amy, it got weirder because it's kind of, we started to feel like things were shifting. Obama was far from perfect. I'm not going to hold him up as like this savior. I got a lot of problems with Obama. However, he did help usher in a few progressive measures that helped a lot of people in this country, mainly when it comes to, same-sex marriage and gay rights. And also he tried really hard to bring in some measures in protecting the environment. He was really hamstrung in a lot of ways by Congress. Why that happened, I'm not going to bore you with the way our governance is structured, but he tried and was unable to. But then it's kind of weird, that whole like uber nationalist rhetoric turned into something even more malignant when Trump came on the scene. Now it's not like that sense of quote unquote patriotism that we saw in the early 2000s has turned into Trumpism. And it's no longer about like love your country. It's a sense of love Trump. Which is so,
and his ideals.
And it is so terrifying because even before, when I vehemently disagreed with that mentality, vehemently disagreed with those thoughts, at least I could understand where they came from. They came from a place of fear. There was still
love in it. Love your country in a way.
A weird narcissistic, codependent kind of love, sure. But it was at least understood. It's like, this is a reaction to an attack. You can go into the reasons. It was a reaction to an attack. And it came out in some ways that were where that I did not agree with, and I do not believe a questioning a war means that you hate the military. That's or that you would hate specific people that would serve in the military. That's the kind of argument we were fed, that if you question this, then you hate Joe Brown down the street who's fighting for your country. I'm like, Joe Brown's a pawn in a really ugly game. I got no problem with him, but I got a problem with the people who sent him. Like, there was no room for nuance. But at least that was I could follow that rhetoric, but now it's just completely rooted in hate and racism, and it's terrifying. And it honestly is watching an encroaching theocracy literally not give a shit. They don't care.
No, they don't.
They don't care. It's not. It used to be they pretended this kind of evangelical, mostly Protestant. The Catholics are involved too. Mostly Protestant movement. But as now they literally don't care.
No.
If it's like saying, no, we don't care if not everybody in this country can vote. We don't care if the election was legal. We're going to say it wasn't legal, and we're going to destroy the Capitol to get it back. We don't care if this hurts people who are Black or brown. We don't care. We don't care if this hurts women. We don't care if women die. Like it's this sense of, they just said, it doesn't matter. I mean, and
it's what we say, and that's what it is.
Yeah. They're like, it's like, this is the new movement. And what was really scaring me is we've got people, and it's getting bigger because it's not just Trump anymore. It's all these little these Trumpinis, these little
mini
Trumps, mini Trumps all over the country. There's a woman running for, I can't even keep up with all these fucking races right now, Amy. I'm sorry.
No, but it's like, that's why I look at it and go, what the hell is happening?
Yeah. So it's like this, there's one woman who was running for governor in typically a rather progressive state. And she came out and said, we're going to get rid of this separation of church and state shit. Like, that's the new mentality, where they're not even pretending anymore to care about things that are the founding of this country, for better or worse. There are a lot of problematic things about the founding of this country, as you understand, being in Australia. But it's to just completely say we don't care anymore about. And in some ways, it's kind of like, okay, well, at least we're being honest, so I know what we're dealing with.
You can look at it as that's a plus, but
really, but it's really scary. And I've had the fact that you can now, it's legal to open carry your guns anywhere. Like right after we've had yet another mass shooting, it's that, it's okay to open carry, but you can't have an abortion for a life-saving procedure.
This is the thing that really frustrates me. Is I saw this video, and this guy was he was protesting abortion, and he said, it's murder, it's whatever. And the guy goes, have you got a gun on you? And he goes, yes. He goes, well, what do you plan on doing that? And he goes, well, I'll do whatever's necessary. And he goes, so again, you think abortion is murder? He's like, yes, but you can carry the gun and you'll use it however you need to. He goes, yes. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but it's really about like, it's if this person. That's where I feel like this is all really sinister, because if they're looking at someone who doesn't look like them and doesn't believe what they believe, then we can get rid of them. They're expendable. But this potential of a human life, that potential human is potentially malleable and could be like that person.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel like that's all coming from. It's like it's really. It's really, really scary. But you know what? At the same time, we're still going out to have coffee. We're still seeing our friends. We're still going to work. We're still watching stupid shows. My husband and I will go out to dinner later. We'll probably stop by and say hi to some friends. You're still living life.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's like, it's also given me perspective as a privileged little cushy American in this side of the world, when we're shown look at this country that's so far away and they are having all these riots. What a dangerous place. And then you're like, ooh, that place is scary. And then it's like, and people are also having birthday parties over there, and they're living,
life
and they're
is
having a good time. It's just a thing. It's like, I experienced this when I lived in, I grew up here in Oregon and I lived in New York City for 13 years. And the way that each place reacted to the other place was very funny because I was in New York and this woman had seen a documentary about someday on the West Coast, we're going to have a big earthquake. We're on the ring of fire. Our turn is coming up. It's going to happen one of these days. It's just natural. And she's like, how can you guys live out there? I saw what the tsunami would do to the coast. How could you like sleep at night? I couldn't sleep at night. And you have volcanoes. I couldn't do it. And I'm just like, I don't know. And I said, well, do you know that? I said, do you travel through Times Square every day? She says, yeah. I said, people in Portland want to know, how can you get on a subway and go through Times Square knowing it's such a major terrorist target? Aren't you scared? She's like, well, no, well, you got to live. I'm like, yeah, you just got to live.
That's like people don't want to come here because they think they're going to get eaten by a spider or a snake.
Well, that's actually true, though, Amy, and you all are in deep danger. And I was going to talk to you about this. I'm just thinking that you're in great denial about the dangers of your spiders and snakes.
It's the venom. It's getting to our brains. We can't think properly anymore.
Listen, I saw one of your spiders dragging a giant snake up a wall. I know what they're capable of. Literally, my husband says he's not coming with me to Australia because he knows he'll get eaten by a spider. And I'm like, I probably will too. So it's okay.
We live dangerously over here.
Right?
But just thankful to be alive.
Have encroaching theocracy. You have snake-eating spiders. Pick your poison, friends. Where do you want to be?
Oh, that's very true. Okay, now let me get to my first question now that I've done that. Let's go right back. And I love to start this at the start of every interview because I find it really interesting to see what people do. But do you have a morning ritual? Do you have something that you do every day? And it could be like a magical one, it could be mundane or a bit of both. But is there a way that you like to start your day?
Yes, absolutely. And fallen a little bit off my practice this week, so I feel like this is a reminder to get back on it. So I try to make the first thing I do is to simply go outside in the morning and greet my land spirits. Sometimes, like in the deepest part of the winter, I'll usually bring some rice out and leave it as an offering. In the driest part of the summer, I'll come out in the morning and leave water. I just go out and acknowledge them, and I compliment the shit out of them, tell them how beautiful they are, how fresh the air smells, and that everything is just beautiful and like super casual. I don't do a big old like invoke a circle and bring in this and then it's just like, I'm just like, look at you trees, you look so pretty. Then sometimes that carries into different parts of the day where one of my commitments to my land spirits is to try to get the invasive weeds off of it, which is a much bigger task than I am just a greenhouse of local invasive species. And they love me and they keep coming back. So I'm trying really hard to help with at least that part of it. Jesus Christ. The Canadian thistle. I'm really sorry, Canada. You are great in so many ways, but you can take your thistle home. Although I don't think it's actually originally Canadian. I think it is another gift from Europe that they brought over on some boat. But and then when I go inside, I usually light the candle on my altar. And I will usually pull a tarot card in the morning and read from Rachel Pollack's book, 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And then I will normally journal. I'll write down what the card said, but then also just talk about what happened the day before. I used to write a lot about my feelings and things, and I found that actually could be really boring to read later. But when I write about the things I did, like even if it's as much as I went to the grocery store and this thing was on sale, or then I had coffee with so-and-so, that's always much more interesting later to look back and look at the things you did. If I really need to write my feelings down, I will. And then I try to do some other kind of reading or some other kind of self-work. I've been slowly working through Diana Rachel's Hex Twisting, which has been super fun. She's very, very funny writer and talks a lot about throwing hexes back, because when you're a public witch, it's something you need to learn to do.
Yes.
And then I do some group coaching with a woman named Cara Lowenthal, who does Unfuck Your Brain. And so I joined her coaching group. So I was just trying to work on some improvements in my thought work. And sometimes it is just get the coffee going.
Yes, the most important thing.
And then just slog into the day. Sometimes that's my ritual, as I just turned on the stove and got the water going. So, yeah.
It's self-care. Self-care
It's
is important.
self-care. It's a process I built over time. Like I first started just by going outside. And then later that turned into go outside and light a candle. Then go outside and pull a tarot card. Then go outside and pull a tarot card and journal. It built onto it. And now I mix it up and try to do something every morning just to give my time to myself before I start the day. Because one thing I learned is that if you start your day with a little time for yourself, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, you still will have time to do everything else later that day. But if you put your self time off, you won't have time. And
no,
maybe the person listening isn't a morning person who's like, listen, it's got to be at night for me. More power to you. I don't really care when people do their things, but I have noticed it is whatever your schedule is like. If you set aside the time for you and you hold that sacrosanct, you will still have time to do all the other stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I always find as well, if I don't do it, I find it easier to make excuses not to do it the later it gets in the day, because I'm too tired. And I'm like, oh, I won't focus properly. Oh, I won't appreciate it, or, whatever. And then you easily go, I'll do it tomorrow. But if you've already done it, then it's done. You don't have to go through that process of lying to yourself the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So how did your witch journey start? Were you always one? Did it come to you at a certain point? Like, tell me how did it all happen?
I was always a really weird kid. My dad's family's Catholic. We were raised technically Catholic, went to Catholic CCD Catholic classes during the week. And they I was the only fourth grader at my first communion because my parents forgot I was supposed to do first communion when I was in second grade. So I was there towering over all the other kids getting my first communion. It was very funny. So I was definitely in, like, I love the rituals of Catholicism. I was obsessed with the candles and the incense and the saints. And I really was into the scary stuff. Like I wanted to know about, the book of Revelations, the apocalypse, the seven seals. I was always into the really scary aspects. But whatever time they would start to scratch those in school, they would kind of turn away as soon as they realized that's really what I wanted to know about. And be like, well, now let's talk about why masturbation's a sin. I'm like, excuse me, can we talk again about when the veil was rendered and the earth went dark? What was going on?
What did that feel like?
What was happening? What was it? Was it a storm or an eclipse? Or did the sun just go out?
Did it rain?
What happened? And what was that? What was going on? And did he smell when he came out of the cave? I had these stupid, weird questions. And so they would be like, oh God. And
Courtney's here again.
No, they're like, okay, it's the strange girl. And then, which it's still that. It's like, okay. Then I went to, my mom's family is Southern Baptist. So from like the mountains of North Carolina, which is a very, deeply, like, the thing is about Southern Baptism is it's so much closer to the family and the people than it is, because you've got the whole. I'm probably fucking up the history here, so if y'all don't yell at me. I didn't go to Baptist school. I went to Catholic school. The Baptists were like, we don't need the priest to baptize us. We can baptize ourselves, and it would literally baptize themselves often in the river. I had a lot of relatives that were baptized in the river until my grandfather built a church with a tank in it, and then my mom was the first one in the fish tank. There we go. So but there's a sense of which, like, spirit and God being so close by and so connected to everything that you do. And there's also like a deep but unspoken belief in a spirit world. So there's a real fear about ghosts. There's a real fear of the devil. The devil is like constantly talking about the devil. And as I've gotten older, I've realized more that it's not like the devil in the way Catholics see the devil, that it's like one entity who's in hell that's like trying to draw you down there. Whereas the devil in kind of more of the Baptist mythology and framework is like anything that is hateful or scary or cruel or mean, or there's a sense in that a lot of a lot of things can be blamed on the devil. You know, somebody having an act of violence is the devil, an act of, you know, an act of, you know, saying something really unkind to someone is an act of the devil. It's like the sense of this being all present. Well, of course, that fascinated the fuck out of me as well, because I'm like, oh, there's ghosts and there's the, you know, devils and, you know, and always wanting to know about that kind of stuff. Like just, and so, but of course, that means, oh, Courtney, that's the weird girl again. And you just rest, you know. So, but when I was, and I grew up in, like I said, I grew up in Oregon, which is a very secular place, honestly. The church has never really had much of a grasp out here. Yeah, of course, we've got our pockets of some very, very weird Christian sects, but for the most part, there's just not like the Christian influence that say is in, you know, in the Midwest or further south. So I did go to this Bible camp every summer, and it was on the Oregon coast, which is a really beautiful place. It's all public beach, so it's not been turned into a bunch of resorts.
Wow.
And, you know, it's still very much left wild. And so there's just this very deep, powerful presence that I always felt was like, well, I feel a lot more God at the beach than I do at church. Why do I feel more God at the beach than I do at church? And, you know, then as I got older and just kept getting drawn more and more to tarot cards, it was the 90s. So everybody was into angel cards and angel speak and talking to angels and celestial everything. And then, you know, one day I read a book on Wicca and I was like, oh shit, this is everything I already believe.
Yeah.
And it's an existing religion. So I, you know, took that. It was actually right around 9/11 that it happened. And I think that happened for a lot of folks. People were questioning, probably around the world, but certainly here in the United States, people were started, you know, having seeking what they believed, what they truly believed. When you have those kinds of experiences of loss or trauma, it does lead you to either abandon religions or pick one up, you know? So
Absolutely.
that for me, it was going that direction.
Cool. And so do you still consider yourself a Wiccan now?
You know, I don't really consider myself a Wiccan now. I think when I really got into this, that was just what people called witchcraft.
Yeah.
In a lot of things, that's just kind of the default term. And it's only really been in the last few years when I've really looked at different Wiccan traditions and recognized I just technically haven't gone through those steps. And I don't practice that way anymore. It's not like I have a rejection of it. It's not that I, you know, think there's a problem with it or that I don't want anything to do with it. I just think that it's like saying, well, it's almost like saying, you know, someone who's like, I'm not a Catholic, not that I have a problem with being Catholic, but I was never baptized. I never went through confirmation. I didn't do or I never did, you know, any of those things. So I can't really technically call myself that, you know.
Can you explain for people who don't understand between someone who does witchcraft and someone who is a Wiccan, what would you say are the differences between them? Because I feel like they're very blurred, and it really just depends on how you choose to practice. Like they can kind of go between the two, but how would you describe the difference between them?
You know, well, Wiccans or people that are in Wiccan traditions, I think without, I'm sure there's always exceptions, but I think with few exceptions do identify as witches. Because, and then they are practicing witchcraft. To me, witchcraft is the practice of using spirit work to make change. And but Wicca has, most Wiccan traditions have a very specific form of initiation. And then there are specific practices around it, specific tools that are involved with Wiccan rituals. And while of course there's going to be a spectrum there, it's not a monolith. There tends to be more of a theology to Wicca, and it is a kind of witchcraft, because there's all kinds of witchcraft out there. And so I would say Wicca is a kind of witchcraft that tends to have a more structured theology and a series of initiations attached.
Yes.
Whereas other forms of witchcraft might have some of that, but might not. So my witchcraft that has come through has traditionally been very deity based.
Yes.
And that again is also shifting for me as well, just because of life and circumstances, but also very much connected to power of place, like working with my land spirits and building that relationship. And drawing from specific traditions that are either, it's interesting because I have kind of, I wouldn't say gone back, but some of the the Christianity I was raised with and the kind of magic within the Christianity that I was drawn to, I have pulled some of that back into my life. So working with the saints, praying to different saints is something that I've started to pull back in again as well.
Interesting.
Using the Bible in prayer and using more folk magic that's connected with Bible magic is something that I've worked on as well, and that I found to be very easy to access just because of my history and also what my ancestors are. So yeah.
I love that about witchcraft. I love that you can literally just like kind of pull bits from all directions and form your own. I think that because for me, I've always grown up and been and I'm still like this, where if I'm like told you have to do it like this, I just go, well, I don't want to. But I love that you can create something that's completely your own, and you can like use different life experiences, use different places where you are at certain points of your life and create this path that's completely your own. And you can just say it's witchcraft. You don't have to give it a specific term. I just think that's one of the most magical parts about it, is that you can just do kind of whatever you want because it works for you.
Yeah, I mean, within reason, I think that there's, to me, witchcraft, there's one definition, and that it's like, are you doing magic to affect change?
Yeah.
Whether it's in yourself, in the world around you, like, are you casting spells?
Yeah.
And because I've met people throughout my journey that call themselves witches, who are hardcore organizers, they're radical feminists, they're artists, and they're doing really great fuck the patriarchy kind of work. And so they embrace the term witch, which I think these people are doing fabulous work, but I don't agree when they call themselves witches unless they're actually doing some kind of spell casting.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then I don't go around getting mad about it. Like, oh, you're taking our term. I just look at them and go, I don't think you're actually a witch, but I think you're really cool. And I'm careful that I don't apply the term witch to others, especially if they are practicing something that I might view as witchcraft, but from an indigenous tradition, because the term witch can be extremely derogatory in certain circumstances, and just because somebody and witch and witchcraft has been used by colonialism and colonization to admonish indigenous spiritual practice around the world and say, well, that's not religion, that's witchcraft.
Yeah.
So even if, say, there is a spiritual elder who is doing what I would personally recognize as spell work, I wouldn't call that person a witch myself, because it's not my term to apply to someone else. Now, if they hear about what I'm doing, they go, oh, well, I'm a witch too, I'm doing something similar, I'd be like, awesome, let's witch together, or whatever. The question of cultural appropriation comes up a lot, and it's caused a lot of anger and discomfort, and I do think as witches, especially as white witches, people need to be mindful as we go through the world, and doesn't mean that but mindful means that doesn't mean you don't learn from other people. And sometimes I feel like people's fear of culturally appropriating, that they won't read a book by a Mexican author about brujeria because they're like, well, it would be appropriation for me to learn. Well, no, it's not appropriation to learn on the terms of the culture.
Right. You're bringing awareness to it. That's respect.
You're bringing awareness. And so if it's, you've got to, and this is something I've talked about with some Mexican-American authors that are writing about their practices. They're like, well, I want people to buy my book.
Yeah.
And if I'm writing about it in the book, then it's okay for you to embrace pieces of that within your practice, where it starts to become where it starts to become hurtful and damaging is when things are taken out of context.
Yes.
They're used in a way because it looks cool without any understanding of the purpose of the item or the ritual, or is it, like with white sage here in the United States, got really popular with New Agers and witches, and it got severely over harvested and became inaccessible to many Native American communities that have had a practice of using this plant as a sacred herb for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And suddenly they can't get it. Well, that's a problem.
Yes.
Yes. And so it's, it comes down to, okay, well, maybe it's not appropriating to do a smoke clearing, but let's be mindful of what herbs we're using. Is this being over harvested? And is it harder for the people who have been using it for thousands of years to now get a hold of it? Then maybe let's think about using something else.
Exactly.
At the same time, I have a friend who's from Guatemala. She's from Guatemala, and she brought me Palo Santo that she collected herself when she was at home visiting her family. Well, it would be rude for me to not take it and be like, well, that's appropriating, I shouldn't use it. No, she gave it to me in friendship.
It was a gift.
It was a gift. And so, yes, I use that on my altar. But am I opening an Etsy shop with the stuff she's given me? No. So it's really it is a journey of mindfulness and a journey of respect. And I just want people to understand that just because something is not of your culture, or you're not of that culture, doesn't mean you can't learn from it or you shouldn't. You definitely want to try to learn from the people in those source cultures who are willingly sharing it. Now, if that culture isn't willingly sharing it, you might want to go learn something from someone else. But there's a lot of people out there that want to share their ancestral traditions. Yeah. And so go learn from them.
Totally. And I think it always just comes down to respect. It's like, what is that person willing to do? That's what you should respect. If they want to share, then you should give them respect of learning from them, and then finding how if you want to incorporate it, you can do it in a respectful way. If they're saying, no, you can't, then that's something you also have to respect. So it's just like listening more than anything. It's just listening. Yeah, exactly.
Or they might say, you can participate in this ritual with me, but I'm not going to teach you how to do the ritual. And it would not be right if you often started leading rituals like this on your own.
And that's the boundary.
Yeah. And just making sure that, and supporting Etsy shop owners or other creators that are doing this work and sharing it, so
I agree.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to talk to you. Obviously, you said before you work a lot with deity work, and this is something that I get questions about all the time. So I wanted to hear from you. I want to pick your brain about this because obviously you've written a book. You've got one about Hecate, Brigid, and then there's the Morrigan. So are they ones that you work with as a group? Have you kind of gone through a time where you were exclusively worked with one, or how did it all pan out? Like how does that work? Do you work with all of them? Do you have specific things for them? What do you do with them?
Well, so Brigid was the first goddess that I was exposed to, and I still credit that journey with Brigid in the life that I have now. Really, she led me. I do believe that firmly. She led me out of, now I'm starting to sound like my Baptist relative. She led me out of the path of wickedness and into the righteous path. But no, seriously, I was a crazy party girl with in some really destructive relationships. And then as soon as I accepted Brigid as my lady savior, then all of a sudden, boom, those relationships are all gone. And then I met my husband and, really started getting published and started, really being the writer I wanted to be. So she really was my primary goddess for a long time.
Yeah.
One thing that a lot of Irish practitioners will say, Native Irish practitioners say, when you invite one, the whole family's likely to come along too. And so, the Morrigan eventually was showing up and she's like, hey, I want a book. And I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. And so I, did one for her as well. And Hecate had always just been on the periphery. It was so funny. For years, I kept having these students that were very, very tightly connected to Hecate, and they wanted training as witches or priestesses. And I would ordain them or train them, working with Hecate. but Hecate kind of came with me during a really intense period of burnout from witchcraft. What happens when you don't do enough of your self-work? And she really came in and told me, listen, if you don't back up and go the other way, you're gonna lose all of your magic. You're gonna lose all of your spirit. You have to turn around. It took me several years to come out of that. But I felt like she was the one to help me get back onto the path of wickedness, because I had lost my way. And she helped me get back onto the witch's path.
It's funny because I have a similar thing with her as well, where when I don't do anything for myself, she'll show up, and it's kind of like that, that older, not like sibling or someone that kind of like checks you and goes, what are you doing? Like, have you done that for yourself? And you go, well, no. And she goes, why? You need to. And she does. Yeah, she's the same with me. She really just kind of wakes you up and go, come on, you matter as well. So do something for yourself, or else you'll just hate it. Like, you'll lose that passion you have. And how can you be convincing if you're not even practicing it yourself? Like, how can it be authentic if you're not doing it properly? You need to start with you, and then the overflow is for other people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, you just, like you said, you're always going to have room to help everyone else if you start with yourself.
Totally.
It's just this weird thing. If you start with yourself, you'll have room for everybody else.
I agree. Yeah. And so what would you say to someone who wants to get into deity work? What's the best place to start? And do you believe that a deity chooses you choose them, or it can be kind of a bit of both?
I absolutely think it's a bit of both, because people will say, I've been reading a lot about this goddess and I feel called to them, but I don't know if they want to work with me. And my feeling is, well, if you're feeling called to them, then they're already calling to you.
Yeah.
It's like somebody says, if you've never had sushi, how can you crave it?
Yeah.
And so, but if I crave sushi all the time, but so I clearly had plenty of it, but if you got to try it at some point. So I feel like if people want to work with a deity and they don't know where to start, I would say read as much as you can about as many different deities as possible, and listen to yourself. And when you resonate, where you react to one of them, such as, oh, this deity sounds like me. They sound like something that I've been through, or they're going through something, or they're really good at this part of life that I'm really struggling with.
Yeah.
And, you can just frankly introduce yourself through the way you would introduce yourself to a person. I think witches in particular do really well if they have some kind of ritual, and that ritual can be super, super simple. So like, you can print out a picture of them, if anybody still has printers. I don't actually know anybody with a printer anymore. Or pull a picture up on...
It's really horrible. I hate it.
Oh, my husband wanted us to buy a new one. I'm like, sure. And then I just never help him find one. And so, and then I want one like 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And then, or pull up even a picture of them on your phone and set that on a table, light a candle, give them a small offering, cup of coffee, some cookies, a glass of wine. If you can, if you are not someone who should be around alcohol, don't do that. A glass of juice is fine too. And just say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'd like to, get to know you. I would not make any lifetime pledges to any deities on the first date.
No.
Right? Because it's really hard to get out of those.
Yeah. There's consequences.
And so you also don't have to do that. These deities are polytheistic, so I've met people who swear that deities claim them and won't let them work with anyone else. And I think that's, that might be true for them in their circumstances. There may be a specific reason why that deity wants them for themselves for either a period of time or their lifetime, but that's not a universal thing.
No.
Yeah.
No, I work with 3. And I don't feel like I could just work with one, because for me, they kind of come and go, and they appear in their own way when I need them. And there are times when I go, well, I don't know how I could work with you here because your energy doesn't fit that. But I know if I called you in, that makes more sense to me. So yeah, if you do have a relationship with one and it works for you and you've got that equal kind of balance of they can fulfill all kinds of areas, then that's great. For me, I kind of like having a gang.
Yeah. Yeah. An entourage.
An entourage. Yeah.
They all show
entourage.
up.
So we're about to go into Imbolc here. So can you talk to me about Brigid? Because obviously Imbolc and Brigid, they come together very nicely. So what's your relationship like with her? And can you tell people a little bit about her? Because she was my first one as well. She brought me onto my wicked path and I have a very soft spot for her. I love her, but I would love to hear your journey with her and to talk a little bit about her.
Well, so, it's a lot of my journey with Brigid. I do mention in the book I have with her, not to like, I'm trying to throw your question off. It's a very long story. And I'm like, wow.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, she was the first goddess I met on my journey. I did make an oath to her and she had my life in a twist until I completed it. When I did really commit myself to her, she turned my world upside down, but I really needed it. I wasn't ready to admit it, but she's like, listen, you got to stop dating that married man. He's not poly. He's just fucking around. And, let's get that one out the door. I got somebody better come in. And, and I met my husband soon after that. So, but like with all gods, there's times where ups and downs. And it's like over the last few years, there were times where I was not on speaking terms with Brigid. I was mad. Yeah. And I would deliberately not light up that altar. I was like, I'm not lighting your candle.
I'm not speaking to you
right now. I'm not speaking to you right now. No, we're not talking. And, because we had some pretty serious losses over the last few years and was just kind of like, nope. Yeah. Because if this is your plan, fuck off. Like that was just kind of was my, and if this wasn't your plan, then I don't know what you're, then what the hell is this all? Then what the hell was all this about? So, but that's like a very human thing is to just get so angry at
you have to blame
your
something.
Higher power and your gods. Yeah. When something is like that. And, I always kind of felt like she was patiently saying, okay, go have your tantrum and you just come back when you're ready.
Yeah.
So then there's now just kind of still I would say it's kind of a fragile peace between us, that I do light my candles to her. She does get offerings. But I'm not, like, oh, Brigid, what do you need? I'm just kind of like, okay, hello. We're good on that. She's a mysterious goddess in that through the Irish lore, we don't really know a whole lot about her as a goddess. There's a lot of lore out there about Saint Brigid, and there's a lot of people who do believe that the goddess Brigid and Saint Brigid have some kind of connection. I operate on under the assumption that they do. So to me, Saint Brigid is the goddess Brigid. There's not a whole lot of strong evidence that links these two. There's just an awful lot as Orla Minxie Costello, who's an Irish priestess, says. She's like, a lot of our ancestors didn't write down, so we're all just trying to guess.
Yeah.
And that she came, and some of the earliest Irish myths that she came with the original Tuatha to Ireland. And what she was known for bringing poetry in the forge, which sometimes when I see memes of her, she's like tapping nicely on the forge and yay. And she's like happily saying a poem and yay. Well, the thing is, you got to look at the context in that Celtic civilization all over Europe, not just in Ireland, all over Europe, came from the use of ironwork. Like it was when they inherited the technology from the Chinese of how to make a forge, how to smelt iron, that they actually built their civilization. So when you see Brigid with a forge, she's not just there making a horseshoe, which is its own really hard work. It's literally, she's saying, this is the goddess of revolutionary technology that changes the way people live. So it's so much. And then also with poetry, that, this is how from what we understand, that the Celts and the ancient Irish would keep their history was through poem. This is how they put their lineage, and they could curse people with a poem. The written word, even today in Ireland, is so very valuable. The art of language, and the language in Irish is so very much full of poetry and magic itself. So there is a lot of power in a pretty poem, no doubt about it. But there's a lot more there that I think we've lost. We don't have context for, particularly outside of Ireland. And so this is like a tool of preserving history. It's a tool of making profound change, and really, in using words as either healing balms or weapons. So that's what she has. But which we don't see her using those things that much in mythology. There's one specific myth. It's very, very sad but that she married Bress in kind of a peacekeeping agreement. She married, and that her husband and her husband's people turned against her own people, and there was a lot of war and there was a lot of death, and her own son that she had with Bress ended up being killed because he was acting as a spy essentially against his mother's people for his father's people. And so she invented keening, like a kind of, a great emotional, almost a spiritual kind of wailing, so that's like only thing we see her in mythology is marrying a guy to try to keep the peace and then losing her son. Because, after this incredibly painful family and societal, conflict. And so, the stories of Saint Brigid, she has a lot of qualities of these older Irish goddesses. Like there are stories about Saint Brigid handing off her staff when Ireland's being invaded and screeching at the invaders, which is a very, Irish and Celtic war goddess thing to do, is to scream and chase off that's something that the Celtic women all over the Celtic world used to do, is to scream and terrify the enemies. So, so she embodies that element. She's very much connected with ways to and again, I'm speaking as though the goddess and the saint are one, because that's just what I choose to ascribe to. But other people are going to have different thoughts. And so through that, she's very much connected with domesticated animals, cows, sheep, lambs, even in some cases roosters, and just being very animals that support the community through their food or their other products. And she was a goddess. She's connected with early spring because Imbolc is the start of Irish springtime, and you're on the brink of your own early days of spring as well.
Thank God. Yes.
We had a long wet winter as well. But she there's a sense of bringing life back into the world after dormancy. It's a time of when, the land's awakening again. The animals are providing milk. There's fresh food. It's a time of relief after a time of what it might have been of hunger and starvation.
Yes.
So it's there is something that's blessed about her. I do think that sometimes she is misunderstood in a lot of neo-pagan circles as being a hearth and home and sweet and love and light goddess. Because I remember when I was peddling my book somewhere, someone said, they're like, I only work with dark goddesses. So she didn't want to read my book on Brigid. Well, first off, I hate that term, light or dark goddess. It's just, it's bullshit, but I also think if you think Brigid is all sweetness and light, you haven't gone near her, because she'll fuck you up.
Totally, she will. She's Irish, man. They're not all sweet and innocent.
Well, and they're like, well, she's some kind of foster mother. And there's this sense of mother goddesses being sweet and loving. And whenever I teach a class, I say, who in here is a parent? I'm like, who here is a parent? And they raise their hand. I'm like, would your kids say you're all sweetness and light? They're like, oh, fuck no.
Absolutely not.
My kids think I'm the devil. I'm like, yeah.
They need to get shit done, and they don't do it by going, can you please go? Like she tells you what she thinks, even if you don't want to hear it.
Oh no, I know for sure.
I'm actually very excited because I have your book that I'm about to read as my Imbolc, gift. So I'm so excited now that you've said all that. I'm good. Like, my brain is like, yes, information.
Well, I hope you like it.
I'm sure I will. I'll tell everyone how amazing you are as I read it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now here comes my ego again.
So now we've talked about what you do in the morning. Do you have an evening ritual?
I limp upstairs and go to bed.
It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I probably need, it would be probably, I'm gonna say I'd need to, but probably good for me to have more of an eating ritual. But the truth is, right now in my life, I'm honestly many days working from 6 a.m. to about 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just not much left of me after 8 o'clock.
No, well, that's your gift then, isn't it? Getting some sleep.
Yes. It didn't happen last night because we've got, Independence Day holiday this weekend. So which means my neighbors are already blowing up shit. And my dog did not let us sleep last night.
No.
Because he thought it was the apocalypse because all these fireworks were going off. So he had us like here. He didn't want us to have the bedroom door closed. So we open it. So then he kept slamming the bedroom door and then begging us to open it because that would actually get us out of bed, and so that he could alert us that the world was ending. To an end.
Well, that's nice though. At least he cares.
It's nice to have that. Yeah,
cats would be like, whatever, you can die.
Oh yeah, the cats are like, I'm gonna eat you first if you die. Yeah. That's the thing is when you have multiple cats, especially, you love them, they love you, and you also know which one is going to start eating your corpse if you die.
100%. And my cat would eat me first out of everyone in our family. She'd be like, I'm going for you. I know you feed me. I know you give me everything I want, but I've got a problem with you, and you're going down first.
Cats.
They're such assholes when they want to be. All right, so I've got 5 questions for you to end. These are like the spitfire round, getting to know you ones.
Yes.
Okay, first one. What is a movie you could watch 1,000 times and never get sick of?
Probably The Goonies.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I could watch. Yeah. They actually just found that pirate ship for real because it was based on it's quick thing because we're wrapping up, but it was based on an actual legend out here in Oregon that there was some kind of Spanish pirate ship or a Spanish trading ship rather that washed up on the beach. The natives for generations had talked about it. And that myth or that story inspired Steven Spielberg to do The Goonies. And like just last month, archaeologists found the remains of what they think was that ship. So
cool.
No one-eyed Willie, no buried treasure, no gold coins, not yet. Some trails of some beeswax, we're
getting closer.
We're getting closer. Yeah.
What's a book that changed your life?
Book that changed my life. God.
As an author, I expect an answer from this one.
Yes, I know. I think it was probably Temple of My Familiar by Alice Walker.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Really helped me understand goddess and deity in a much more, that's the one that I think probably changed my life the most.
Beautiful. Is there an animal that you have a special connection with?
Well, my big stinky husky mix, yes, absolutely. But if there's if there's a specific creature outside of, I would say it's the dragonfly.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They are, and they got things right the first time. They really haven't evolved much since the dinosaur days. They just figured themselves out, and they really, they're a little smaller than they used to be. They're really good at what they do. They're the most ruthless killers in the animal kingdom. They have like a 97% kill rate. So if you're a gnat and a dragonfly is after you, you're fucked. That's it. There's no question.
Goodbye.
So, when I see dragonflies, it's a sign to me that I'm in the right place at the right time.
Beautiful. I love that. Is there a place where would you go if you could travel to it right now?
I really want to go to Alaska. I've not been.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Mm-hmm. I want to go up there and look at caribou and stuff.
Yeah. I just feel like Alaska would just be everywhere you look is beautiful.
Yeah.
Just one of those places where like, oh, this is so beautiful. Nothing is ugly.
Yeah.
All right, last one. What does happiness look like for you?
For me, or when I see it?
For you.
I would say it's sharing books with my niece and nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
totally
a
got my
beautiful
nephew
answer.
into Yeah, I totally got my nephew into Tolkien.
Ah,
And so I gave him the Lord of the Rings series for his birthday. And
Yeah.
there's this picture of him just like when he realized what it was. So yeah.
good
Yeah.
answer. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I
Oh.
gave my niece a book on mermaids, and she just sat down and told me everything about mermaids, because there's just in a very scientific, clinical way, like mermaids do this, mermaids do that, and mermaids do that. And I'm like, awesome.
That's the best. Books are such a gift. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I feel like I could sit here for another hour and pick your brain even more. But I really, really appreciate you being here. And if you're listening, you need to read Courtney's books, because as you just heard, she's filled with so much wisdom. So stop listening, go and buy all of them, sit and read them, and come back, message Courtney, tell her she's amazing.
Thank you, Amy. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you
and you
so
have
much.
a wonderful springtime, and congratulations
Thank
on making
you.
it through the winter.
We did it. We survived.
Yay!
Thank you so much. Thank you.